of lore, all in search over glory. The history and mystery of lads, lasses and all, the discoveries and voyages, the rise and the fall.
Follow me now as we go back in time. We trace the steps of Irish lineage to find Joseph from Carlo and Kevin the dog, guide you through the ways of Shine's
Part 2. The Rise of the Foot Soldier.
Finally.
While he's on his way. This is the bit where it all happens. He's really only around for about 5 years. And we're going to talk about 3 or 4 of those years.
It's all epilogue and prologue. There's about 4 or 5 years of the whole man. Granted, he only lasted about 33. But
yeah,
we did a whole episode, and we will do a whole other episode. But this will be the only one really anyone cares about. This is Star Wars episode 5.
This is the one where everything happens. The first episode, that was basically like, wasn't his dad interesting? Maybe. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And then he's at 1916, and he's basically shepherding around a very sickly Joe Plunkett, and he's not particularly impressed with the tactics used during the Rising, and then he gets locked up in Fragnock, and we're about to start with him being released, and he's going on. This is his big run. We'll finish this episode with the truce from the War of Independence. So this will be the bit where everyone loves him. And then episode 3, the heel turn. Okay? So if you're a big pro Collins fan, this is the one. But, so the end, I don't know what we left the last episode, but basically, they're all locked up in Fragnock, which becomes known as the sort of University of Revolution. But there's for some reason, everyone in Ireland gets annoyed that they executed these lads. They seem happy enough that they're locked up, but then when they start shooting the leaders, people get annoyed.
Yeah, well, hold on. They're rebels, Kevin, but they're our rebels. It's not okay if the English come in here and do it. We'll kill them ourselves.
We'll take care of that internally. Once the British come in and start shooting people, Irish people aren't happy. More important than that, American people aren't happy. And the British are trying to get the Americans into World War One, so they don't want to annoy them. There's also legal issues over stuff. It turns out maybe by the rule of law, you can't arrest 2,000 men and put them in a giant open camp.
Says who?
Without any...
The UN?
Well, I don't know. I suppose The Hague, all those things haven't been invented yet, but during World War One, I suppose they're trying to avoid any kind of propaganda the Germans can use. So arresting a load of lads without trial and putting them in an open air prison. It's a little bit concentration. I don't know. A little bit suspect.
Did you stop yourself from saying the big A?
I did, yeah. Yeah. But, so... Whatever, with all these things, there's internal pressure, there's external pressure.
That's handy for them then, because if they use the Irish concentration camps as a deflection tactic, no one will look at the Ethiopian ones.
Exactly. You can't fight the battle on 2 fronts. So they release everybody.
God knows Germany tried.
Yeah. But whatever happens, they release everyone, which, to be honest, this seems like too much of an overcorrection. I get they're getting a lot of pressure for like locking up about 2,000 guys without trial. But then, they start releasing people in August. It was like 4 or 5 months after the Rising. They just let everyone go.
Yeah, it's like December time, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so between August and December, they let all the troops out. And then the following summer, they let all the leaders out.
I'd heard all the lads had promised to come back after the Christmas holidays, and it was more of a show of good faith.
Yeah.
Nah, I've had enough of Wales.
Whatever happens, they're all back now, including Collins. So he gets back, December 1916.
Yeah, so he gets back a little,
back into the mix.
He gets back earlier than the leaders of it then, though. So that the next revolution, he's back out 6 months before everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's off to talk to...
Yeah, and he's off to talk to Kathleen Clark, Tom Clark's widow. So she gets him... I suppose it's kind of been said that she was left in charge of the IRB. She's left with the reins because they reckon they're all going to be in prison for this time. So through her, I suppose, Collins gets back involved with the IRB and the Irish National Aid and Volunteer Dependence Fund, which is raising money for the survivors of 1916, the widows and children sort of thing, but also a little bit of a ruse just to go around and be talking to lads when you're going in and saying, sorry that your son got shot during 1916. I see you have 3 other sons. Would they be any interest in? So, a bit of smoke and mirrors cover, but they're getting the IRB back up and going again. Between these 2 organizations, this is Collins' cover for the second attempt in his lifetime. He's going for another war. So Sinn Féin, much like the Sinn Féin of today, are getting blamed for all the world's problems.
Yeah, for a lot of things they didn't do. Didn't even know about.
Even though they didn't do them and they're now actually in power, it's actually their fault that all this stuff happened. So Arthur Griffith, Sinn Féin had been around since 1905. I think his big thing was he wanted dual monarchy. He was like, what if we had an independent Ireland with our own king?
I thought that they should fight each other. That's how we get rid of them.
Yeah.
There's a dual monarchy.
Yeah. There is, I think I wrote, there is some scheme that they want to get over a guy called like Prince Joachim. His idea was, anyway, we have our own king. But after 1916, Sinn Féin's getting the blame for all of the Easter Rising. So it becomes the party to join if you are a big Republican Fenian bastard. In January of 1917, Joseph Plunkett's dad, George Plunkett, he runs in a by-election as an independent. He wins, and then he says, I'm not going to take my seat. And people start to think, that's pretty cool. That's a pretty good move. So
no one's done that before.
When Plunkett does it, then I don't think he runs as an independent, and then he's kind of like, they're like, well, what? That sounds like a Sinn Féin kind of an idea. Come on over here. You've also got in May, so these are all like by-elections. I guess people are dying or stepping down, and there's like by-elections being held in various places around Ireland at 1917 and 18. So the next one in May, Joe McGuinness, who's still in prison as one of the sort of 1916 leaders, he's still in jail. And Collins, supposedly, I don't know if it's overstated how much of a hand he has in this, but people say Collins had a big hand in getting him elected. So this is another classic Sinn Féin. Now you're elected a man in prison who's not even going to take a seat.
Best place to do your politicking.
Best place to do your politicking. Joe McGuinness ran on a slogan of "Put him in to get him out," which is that's catchy. He's locked up. Imagine what he could do if he wasn't. So there you go. You got men not taking their seats. You got men getting elected from prison. This is the beginnings of a manifesto. So that summer of 1917, all the rest of the 1916 guys get out, including Dev. So there's kind of a reorganization of Sinn Féin at that stage that gets Collins. He is sort of part of the executive. I think it's reorganized with like Cathal Brugha, Griffiths, Dev, and Collins. But
what a Mount Rushmore there.
Oh yeah, all the fellas are getting. It's the class of 1916. They're out and they're back again. But this is September 1917. This was a good parallel moment. I don't know if you're reading about this, but Thomas Ashe, who's another one of these like poet-teacher revolutionary combos that seem to be very common at that time, I guess. So he is arrested after 1916. He is credited as being one of the only leaders of 1916, one of the only sort of battalion leaders who actually does something tactically. He is a tactical ambush. He's out in Ashburn, and they manage to, with less men, take over and subdue more RIC officers with a little bit of a rural ambush. So obviously Collins is going to like that. So Ashburn's in prison for that. He gets released along with the rest of them, but he goes straight back to making political speeches. So he gets arrested again. He's arrested in Mountjoy, and he wants to be detained as a political prisoner in Mountjoy. He's not. So he goes on hunger strike. And then he dies. I won't go into the details of it, but it's pretty grim. This is back in the days when they were force-feeding hunger strikers. It's pretty grim, but he dies. And there's a big funeral for him. Collins helped sort of organize the funeral for him. And I don't know, I thought this was maybe reading too much into this, but there's like the famous, in 1915, Podrick Pierce gives a speech at O'Donovan Ross's graveside. And he gives this like, the fools have left us our Fenian dead, and while Ireland holds these graves, Ireland unfree shall never be its speech. And he gives this big speech, and everyone's going fucking nuts, and they're like, let's do it, let's do the rising, the bastards. And he's a poet man, he's a thinker, he's a dreamer, he's a good speech maker. Fast forward 1917, September, Thomas Ashe is dead. Collins goes up to give the speech this time. There's a little 21 gun salute kind of thing. People are firing guns over the graveside. Collins walks up and says, nothing additional remains to be said. That volley which we've just heard is the only speech which is proper to make over the grave of a dead Fenian. And walks away. which is like,
It's
so that's
you get away with
that's
that
pretty
once. You get away with that one time. It's like you didn't have anything prepared.
Yeah.
You go up and then throw that out there. Yeah.
yeah, I did also think that that's a classic. Like, fuck, everyone loves Pierce's speech. What am I going to say here? Nothing more needs to say. But also, like,
when my brother got married, I did one of the speeches, and they threw to me. But we'd been told there wasn't really going to be any, so last minute I had to do one, and I just flustered. I was like, what can you say about Shane? He's always been like a brother to me. And got a nice little laugh, and I was like, hey, happy marriage, that's good. Sit down, don't make a fool of yourself. Get the fuck down.
Just George Costanza, you get the laugh and walk away.
But can you Costanza a Fenian funeral?
Yeah.
You can, seemingly.
But it's, I don't know. I mean, this is putting too much stock into the speech. This is like the defining. If you were making a movie, this is a good parallel, I suppose. You've got the sort of flowery speech of Pierce that leads up to the Rising. Then after the Rising, you've got
Collins letting other lads shoot guns and saying that's how it's meant to be done.
There you go. Exactly. Letting other lads shoot guns and being like, that's all that needs to be done. Let another man shoot for you. Either way, it's a great mic drop moment for him. So all these Fenians are coming back. Everyone's gathered around Thomas Ashe's funeral. It's very much an echo of, Donovan Ross's funeral. You get the Ardèche in October 1917.
Wait, you saying that all the lads would have met at his funeral and then started the whole thing up again? Almost like something rising from the ashes.
There you go. Yeah, this is exactly.
The Fenian rising from the ashes.
This is why they're all poets. It's fucking easy. The whole thing writes itself, basically. But, you get the Ardèche, or like the sort of Sinn Féin party meeting in October 1917. There's argument over what direction Sinn Féin's going to go in, and basically Griffith steps aside and Dev becomes the leader of the party. So I guess this is kind of it. It's been in the works all in 1917, but now Sinn Féin goes from, I think, fringe party from before 1916 that was about, well, if we had a king, and now after 1916 and after Dev takes control in 1917, it's now like, if you are a Fenian and you want to be getting elected from prison and not going to Westminster and giving cool speeches by gravesides, this is the party for you. So this is the new structure, and Collins is narrowly elected into Sinn Féin's executive. I read that in one place, and I thought that was a bit of shade thrown at him for some reason, so I'm putting it in here as well. Maybe to show that he maybe is not much of a politicking man at this stage. I think he gets his big run in a little bit when Dev goes to prison. But
yeah, I was going to say, people wouldn't have known him as much yet. Yeah, he wouldn't have been he would have been doing plenty, but to be in the actually like the executive council, you'd be like one of the head honchos.
Yeah,
and plenty of lads who were big, still actually from 1916 that survived. Turns out still into Fenianism.
Yeah,
they hadn't got enough.
So he's more of, I guess, during this period, 1917 and 1918, he's building his network of informants. Let the politicians do the politicking. He is more involved with the RB and more involved with his spy network. He's going after disenfranchised Catholics who are working for the Dublin Metropolitan Police, the DMP. So, I don't know, I find this, I guess, so these men are employed by the British to be the police, and they're the G-men, the division that is kind of set up to root out the RB and all this sort of stuff. But even within that division, they're still, I guess, they're passing over Catholics for promotion and stuff like that. So, because he's specifically going after like the Catholics who are annoyed. And it's funny that even in that really sensitive area, they're still like pissing off the Catholics by not promoting them.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like it's rife for Collins to come along and start poaching that. So you get the likes of Ned Broy is kind of involved in the castle, and there's a couple of other there's Gilroy. We'll talk about some of the other names later on. But one of the other big ones from a little bit later, I guess, 1918, 1919, James McMahon is the director of post and telegraphs in Dublin, and he needs a secretary. So he employs a lady called Nancy O'Brien, who is Collins' second cousin. So, bit of a misstep from them. She is also instrumental in his spy network. She's literally typing out notes for the fella, so every once in a while throws a couple of Collins' way. So
what is it? Could you say that again? I'm just going to type this one again just to make sure. I really think I got it now.
Bloody hell, Nancy, we've spent literally twice as much money on ink as I thought we would this year. What the bloody devil's going on? It's almost as if everything's being duplicated.
You think that the intelligence networks back then, I suppose, yeah, you'd have to go through the record books if you could find them, whatever, but like and a lot of them would have been burnt down. I don't know. I suppose not yet, time-wise then, but is that an oversight, or is it difficult to find second cousins? Like, I still don't really know what a second cousin is, so for the English to learn.
Exactly.
In England, they just call them their wives.
Yeah, if you're in the monarchy. I guess, I mean, like, everyone's related. Like, if you start talking to someone in Dublin for long enough, you'll probably find some sort of connection. I guess maybe the British administration didn't comprehend how inbred we are.
Yeah, how tightly knit. Yeah,
that you'd employ a random woman off the street and she turns out that she's a second cousin of the head of the intelligence network of your main foe at the time. It happens, or at least it did happen in this situation. But he's got his intelligence network, and through his intelligence network, he gets a big tip off. Heading into May of 1918, World War One is in full flow.
I thought you thought that's what the tip was going to be. I thought the tip was going to be, there's a war on. Oh, Jesus.
Mick, I got something juicy for you. I think the Germans are going to attack. But the Ottoman front is underdefended. I think the underbelly is ripe for attack. The tip-off he gets, basically, so the British want to, or toy with the idea of bringing in forced conscription. They want Irish men to be forcibly conscripted into the army to go fight in Europe during World War One. This is not met favourably. People are very annoyed by this. Again, another boost for Sinn Féin. A lot of people turn to Sinn Féin. They're kind of like, anti-conscription. They're opposing this. And the British, they don't like that. So they come up with a little plan to disrupt Sinn Féin. And they say, these boys are in league with the Germans. It's known as the German plot. They basically just pull out of nowhere, fabricate this notion that Ireland would align with World War One Germany in order to give a launch pad to attack Britain, which is completely
why would they think
based
just because we had a couple
several
of
events that happened.
Just probably a lot of guns. We've had, okay, yeah. The sale of weapons.
Yeah,
the documents that came out.
1912 weapons. Erskine Childers, Roger Casement. Pulled it out of their fucking arse, really, out of fucking nowhere, just to blame these good old men who are barely even back in the country after being locked up. They haven't even had time to come up with a plan. So basically, Collins gets a tip off this is happening. It's coming down the line. They're going to round up and arrest the Sinn Féin executive, the heads of Sinn Féin, under this German plot. Collins gets word of this. He runs down to Dev, who's the head of Sinn Féin at the time. Eamon De Valera, he says, they're coming. We got to get out of here. Scram. They're about to arrest us all. And Dev, always the opportunist, he says,
2 steps behind.
Let's get arrested. You know what's going well? Joe McGuinness, that went well. Put him in to get him out. Everyone liked that. It's May 1918. He's been back. He's been out of prison for about 6 months, I think. He gets back in June 1917. So
but
he's barely home.
His idea of prison wasn't like Tom Clark in England. It was, ooh, I miss me 3 square meals a day. In fairness, the country didn't have them at the time. Get back in there, Def.
Yeah, and he's just, like, he's only been home for, not 6 months. Yeah, he's been home for almost a year, I guess, at this point. But during that, he's seen lads die in hunger strike in prison. Whatever, I don't know why. This is his big plan. He thinks it'll be good PR to get arrested for treason. So Collins, he has a different idea. He says, what if we don't do that? Instead of trying to fight them from the inside, what if we stay out here and actually fight them? So there's a bit of a split. Collins, alongside lads like Harry Boland and Diarmuid O'Hegarty, they stay on the outside. And this is where they sort of become more high up in Sinn Féin, just because, I suppose they're not maybe technically high up in Sinn Féin, but they're sort of de facto leaders because they're the only men who aren't in jail. So the rest of the lads are running it from inside the prison cells, but these are the men on the outside. They're the faces that everyone's seeing. They are going around and they are organising and getting ready for the 1918 UK general election.
The big one. The Sinn Féin landslide.
Yes, the Sinn Féin landslide. Things are changing. People in Britain are getting sick of war, or maybe they love war. I'm not really sure. But either way, they hold an election in December of 1918. All across the UK, which at the time includes, reluctantly, Ireland. And in Ireland, there's a landslide victory for Sinn Féin. They get 73 out of 105 seats, so it's about, I think, 46% of the vote. The Irish Parliamentary Party, who had kind of been the main kind of Irish independent political wing for about 40 years at that point, they almost get wiped out. It's a really bad election for them, and Sinn Féin, it becomes clear, I suppose, that is the party for Republicans.
Yeah.
It's a big one in general. Countess Markievicz becomes the first woman ever elected to the British House of Commons.
What that man did for this country.
What that man did for this country.
I think I've said that. We probably said that so many times without any reference. So you just Google Countess Markievicz, what that man did for this country. Or we should throw it up on the Instagram so people don't keep thinking I'm an idiot. 1916, our day.
97 years ago, people lost their lives in that park over there. Constant Markievicz gave up his life to enable us to eradicate suppression, taxation, eviction, criminality.
But Countess Markievicz, first woman ever elected to the British House of Commons, but she doesn't take her seat because that is the Sinn Féin manifesto. None of them are taking their seats. They are going to set up an Irish Parliament instead. So Cathal Brugha is de facto head of Sinn Féin at that time, since Dev is still in prison. Mm-hmm. He is not a fan of Michael Collins, I think. I've certainly seen enough written that they were at odds with each other.
Is that just because he's from Cork?
I think maybe that.
I mean, there had to have been some division within the ranks of just based on as much as we know about Ireland.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We definitely, even for that little bit of a period of time when we were all fighting for independence, definitely we could not set aside the small differences.
Even within the next 5 years of Sinn Féin is going to split into Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. All these people are there already. So obviously there's big catalysts that cause these splits. But this is a big moment. I mean, this could be its own episode of a more political podcast. But 1918, the first Dáil, these Sinn Féin elected MPs at the time, they don't take their seat in Westminster. They don't take their seat in British Parliament, and instead they just set up their own sort of unrecognised parliament. But this is a big moment in the history of Ireland, and it's a little unfortunately overshadowed by the fact that on the same day, 2 Irish volunteers shoot and kill 2 RIC officers in Tipperary.
Yeah.
During what's known as the Solo Head Bake ambush. Mm-hmm. So bad timing and or great timing. This is seen as what kicks off the Irish War of Independence. Now, to be fair, the British are probably not happy that all these people have been elected and they've just decided to set up their own parliament.
Yeah, I imagine that could have been, that was probably part of it anyway, but on the first day of the Dáil, this happens, that you have to go that's an attempt, that they've definitely coordinated this, that it was a plot.
Yeah, well, Memo 1 goes over to Westminster and they're and we're not taking our seats in Parliament, but this is not an act of war. This is a peaceful protest, diplomatic, true democracy. We are taking our stand and taking the country back for the people of Éire, the Dáil. And the second memo comes in and be we have shot 2 cops as well. Sorry about that. That unrelated.
That was
unrelated.
That was.
But the first official act of this government, we'd like to apologise for those 2 officers being shot.
That was one out-of-line officer. That's why we call it the solo head beg.
So this is it. It's wartime. And this is the beginning, I suppose, where Collins... Well, no, I've already said that. Yeah, so it's time for the War of Independence. Again, there's an entire podcast series that focus on the War of Independence. Empire, actually, that podcast is doing the Irish War of Independence at the minute. But we're just going to jump around, some of the key bits that involve Collins. The first big one, and we've done a separate episode on this, you can go listen to it, is the prison break. So Dev, he's still in prison for this German plot. I think pretty quickly afterwards, they realize that there is no German plot. The whole thing's made up. When we did that episode, I think initially they're brought in and they're getting roughed up by the guards. The guards are all good British men who are disgusted at the idea of this traitorous German plot. After a while, they realize that the whole thing was a scam and they kind of loosen up. So the lads they're in prison, but I don't know, it seems pretty, there's stories of them just sitting around smoking, listening to records, stuff like that. But at the same time, it's prison and Dev wants out. And he wants out to annoy the British, to destabilize the British. He wants to show up at the
Because you've just described like the Irish version of the prison scene from Goodfellas.
Oh yeah, it's that
It's just
exactly.
that. It's
yeah.
like, no, you got to peel
For
that
sure.
potato as thin as possible. Well, then just fry it up on the radiator.
Yeah, use a razor just to shave off potato strands. But he wants out of jail, and there's a spat of like prison breaks being organized this time by Rory O'Connor. He'll come up maybe in part 3, but he's another the Fenians running around at this stage. But Collins and Harry Boland are the men for Dev's prison break. So this is shown in the movie. For some reason, they throw in extra details that Dev was smuggled out wearing a woman's fur coat, which again maybe speaks to the bias of
Almost definitely.
Neil Jordan.
Yeah.
But
Who, in his defense,
anyway,
after the film, did come out and say that it wasn't a historical film. Even though it's named after a historical figure and it tells chronologically the events of what happened, it's not a historical film.
But Collins helps break Dev out of prison, and they get back. They're back in Ireland around April, and it's around this time Collins becomes the Minister for Finance. So he succeeds Owen McNeill, and by April he's the new Minister of Finance, or he's the Minister of Finance for this new Dáil, and he's put in charge of funding the Dáil, getting money for this new government of ours. That June, Dev heads off to the US. He goes on his Give Us Money tour,
Yes.
and he takes Harry Boland with him.
And then
which-
he takes half the money for himself.
Well, yes, we'll maybe talk about this a bit more in the Dev episode. What happens with him and Harry over there? It's certainly implied in the movie, and I've read it in a few places that this was seen as a power move to
cut
I
Collins
suppose-
off at the knees. Yeah, he needed Harry out with him,
Yeah, I guess the last
and
time
Harry took his side when he said, "Don't go to jail." And then
Yeah.
you look at all the good stuff Collins has done. He's like, "But now I'm gone away for a lot longer."
And I don't know, was it fair, but people kind of paint Dev as being, because like he's in prison and, you know, he's like, this is great. I'm locked myself away for Ireland. This would be a great political statement. And he's just getting news of Harry and Collins running around actually doing stuff. Like there's a big election like that. These are huge moves that are happening when Dev is sitting in prison and he has to get on the phone and like ask the boys to break him out. Must be a bit embarrassing.
He's able to use the phone now, is he?
So maybe he takes Harry or maybe it is just the fact that Harry's good at his job and he wants him with him. Because initially he takes Patrick McCurtain. He takes someone else and he sends them back, and Boland goes over with him. But whatever it is, anyway, those two boys, they're away on. To
Boland
America
was
to
meant
look
to
for
be a
money,
bit of
and-
crack, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, so then if you're looking for, it's like Dev's not going to go over and like be, but it's like, I'll go meet the lads in the offices, you go to the pubs.
Yeah, he needs that's true. He needs a pint man with him. And the two-prong approach. But whatever it is, they're doing the away game, and Collins, he's left at home to raise money here. And this is where we get Collins's big film debut. I think this is one of the things you were most shocked by in this research. Me as well, really, because you kind of, you know, you think of Collins as the secret, all the stuff when you're growing up, it's like Collins, the secret spy man. The British didn't even know what he bloody looked like.
He'd be waving at the police officers, they wouldn't know it was him. And then you find out that he was in a video, front and center in a video, on the steps of where Robert Emmett was hung. And he sat there in a black and white video, no audio, so it's just clips of, you see like a woman and Michael Collins giving her money. And it turns out, that's the widow of Tom Clark. Does everyone remember Tom Clark? And it just goes, it's just a procession of all of these rebel heroes. Yeah. And it's just Collins giving all of the money and a little wink to the camera. And then they went and took that reel, and by force, supposedly, in any of the theatres that wouldn't play it around the country, they just held a gun to the projectionist.
Yeah.
And that's Mick Collins. And how they ever thought that the British didn't know who he was or what he looked like it's mad.
But like the period where people say that they didn't know what he looked like would only be the 1920, a year and a half maybe, where he would have been conceivably unknown. But it's all after this, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it's like it's whenever he now rises to like a power that the British are looking for him, then it's like, we don't know what he looks like. Don't look at that video they just released that they've shown in every theatre around the country.
So basically, this is it's a great bit of PR stunting. We'll put the video maybe up on the Instagram because it's bizarre, but he's meant to raise money for the government, and he starts selling Republican bonds. So you can buy a bond in the new Irish Republican government. It's as safe as houses.
Pierce Brosnan.
It's a great propaganda video. He gets the block that Robert Emmett was decapitated on. So you're right, yeah, Emmett gets hung and then gets decapitated afterwards. So he gets the block supposedly the decapitated Robert Emmett on.
Oh,
they
I thought it
bring
was
that out in front of.
That makes more sense. I thought it was on the steps of that. Yeah, right. So they looked at that and thought, Jesus, that'd make a great table.
They bring it down to Padraig Pearse's old school. So it's outside the schoolhouse. They're using the Robert Emmett decapitation stone as a desk, and they're sitting behind it. It's him and Diarmuid O'Hegarty. And yeah, as you say, they've got a procession of all of the widows of 1916, all of the big Republicans of the day, Eamon Kant's widow, Tom Clark's widow, Sean Connolly's, Michael Mallon's, the O'Rahillys. They get Grace Gifford, Joseph Plunkett's wife, Hannah Sheehy Skeffington, James Connolly's daughter, then Arthur Griffith, Joe McGuinness, Owen McNeill, Erskine Chilton. Like there's all. Not only is he putting his own face in it, he's also showing, I'd say, the G-Men's most wanted list where you're walking by, receiving these Republican bonds. And he gets Joseph McDonough, so Tom McDonough's brother, one of the signatories. His brother, Joseph McDonough, is a burgeoning director. He's got himself a camera,
yes,
and he's making a movie called Willie Riley and his Colleen Bawn. Which is, we need to watch that, I guess, for the film club. But he's making that in and around Dublin, and Collins asks him to take a day off shooting to come down and film this thing for him. I think the story comes from Joe McDonough that they sent the volunteers around the country with the film reel and got every cinema to show it, sometimes by gunpoint, which is, again, completely at odds with this man of mystery. But I suppose that does, he tries to make himself maybe a shadowy man of mystery afterwards, but it's a very funny PR move. I forgot to write down the guy's name, but I think also in the procession it's either Sinn Féin's director of propaganda or the IRB's director of propaganda is there, which felt like a real slight just to invite him down and be like, well, this is how it's done, fella.
That is good.
That's his big Minister of Finance move, but
it is a good move.
It's a great move. So supposedly by September the following year, they've raised £380,000 from people are buying these bonds. I think it's just a way to do a little bit for the country. So at some point during this period as well, mid-1919, I guess, so before his big finance stunt, he becomes the IRA's Director of Intelligence. Well, so at some point the Irish Volunteers become the IRA. He's the Director of Intelligence, and to act on the intelligence that he's getting in, he establishes his squad, a group of gunmen, all IRB men, to carry out clandestine assassinations, essentially, or counterinsurgency. So he's getting in information, and he's kind of got his 12 apostles or his small group of men who will go and, what would you say? I'm trying to think of a more military style term for shoot men in their beds if needs be.
Squad, pretty cool name. That's before young tech bros or whatever have started using it as, or just lads in general. I mean, like me and the squad rocket up into the pub. That's stupid. Yeah. Back then it sounded pretty cool. It's like 12 men going out to shoot people. Calling it 12 apostles is mental because he's the leader. So does that mean that, because if that's a nickname that's been given to them, it's like, all right, that's a bit up Collins' arse. If he's given them that name, it's ridiculous, and I'm on Dev's side. You can't be going around. Well, let's just call them the 12 apostles. And what should we call you, Mick? Oh, Big Mick.
Who was it that hung around with those 12 apostles? Yeah, I mean,
you shouldn't have let them know how many people were in it. Then you're looking. It's the old chicken trick. Let two of them loose. The 1 and 3 are running around the school.
Yeah.
They're always looking for number 2. It doesn't exist. The 12 apostles, turns out, it's only 4. Or a million. It's just every single lad.
But so he's got his, public face of Minister for Finance. Behind the scenes, he's the Director of Intelligence. He's organizing. He's got his hit squad set up. Heading into 1920, the War of Independence is ramping up. So RIC officers, understandably enough, they are starting to resign because they keep getting shot and killed by the IRB, the Irish Volunteers, or the IRA, whatever name you want to use for them at this point. Police force is basically dropping out. So the British need to bolster the ranks. World War I is well and over by this stage, so there's a lot of angry, PTSD-filled young men hanging around who have maybe taken a liking to the violence and the killing of the fields of Belgium. And they start recruiting for a new group in January 1920, the Black and Tans. So they get deployed to Ireland in March of 1920. Later on that year, I think by July, August, they're followed up by the auxiliaries, who are sent over to like bolster the RIC ranks. But the Black and Tans are maybe the most notorious. I had a group on the tour the other week. They were over from America. And he was like, back home, I was ordering a Black and Tan in an Irish bar. I told them I was coming over to Dublin. They told me not to order it over here. And I was like, it's the one group.
Don't.
No matter how, at the start of the other episode, I was talking about how I thought growing up Collins was kind of like this figure that everyone kind of liked. In this fractured time of 2025, I think the one thing all Irish people will agree on is fuck the Black and Tans. Like, it's the one group that no one on any side of any argument would be like, actually, let's hear from the Black and Tans.
It's just they call the devil's advocate. The devil's like, I'm not fucking getting anywhere near this. That's what G did. It was bad.
These are bad
form.
boys. Yeah. So I was trying to explain to him. I think I finally got across the idea of like, it'd be like walking into Atlanta and ordering a KKK. And eventually it was like, yeah, don't order the Black and Tans. But he was like, what? How do I order a half Guinness, half Smithwick's? It's like, what?
Don't.
Just don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. Order 2 pints and fucking drink them like a normal person. No. I don't know. Anyway, they're bad boys, okay? And they're heading over in 1920 to really... They come synonymous throughout the war with like burning stuff down, shooting civilians, all this sort of stuff. They run rampant around the country. It kind of in tandem with this, Collins really starts deploying the sort of guerrilla war tactics, operating the flying columns, becomes the main military tactic for the Irish forces in 1920. One interesting incident, I suppose, that involves Collins. 15th of June, 1920. If you remember from the first episode, a young man called Captain Percival Lee Wilson. He gets assassinated in Gorey. He was the district inspector for the RIC. He was from Cork originally before joining the British Army in 1915. In the first episode we talked about, he became notorious for his involvement with Tom Clark and Sean McDermott. After the Easter Rising, he's seen by Collins supposedly roughhousing these two, specifically the old man Clark. A man I suppose Collins would have idolized or looked up to. And in 1920, he's shot 5 times when he's walking home from the train station. Was it revenge for Tom Clark? According to, I don't know. So there's a man called Paddy O'Daly, who's one of the leaders of the squad, or one of the members of the squad. Later in life, he would say, no, this wasn't just simple revenge for Tom Clark. This is a tactical assassination. He said Captain Lee Wilson was not shot because he had ill-treated Sean McDermott and other prisoners in 1916. There were other British officers just as bad, and no attempt had been made to shoot them. I believe he was shot because of the position he held at the time, and for no other reason. I am satisfied from my long experience with the squad that no man was shot merely for revenge, and that any execution sanctioned by Michael Collins was perfectly justified. O'Daly also noted he'd once actually been reprimanded by Collins, who heard he was planning on taking revenge on an officer who had shoved his daughter to the ground during 1916.
Yeah.
So basically during the Rising, one of O'Daly's neighbours, a man called John Winters, he was in the DMP, he comes over to search the house for guns. Supposedly O'Daly's 4-year-old daughter, who was lame, I think she had some issue with her leg, referred to as lame daughter, I guess. So Winters is searching for guns. Apparently his 4-year-old lame daughter, she calls Winters a traitor. So he pushes her to the ground.
That's adorable.
It is adorable. You're a fucking rat, Winters. Supposedly, yeah, she knocks the daughter to the ground. When the squad gets formed then later in like 1919, Collins hears that O'Daly is planning to kill Winters, who still lived in his neighbourhood. Collins says, "What is this I hear about you going to shoot Winters?" O'Daly says the whole thing's a joke, and Collins says, "This is too serious to be a joke." O'Daly said later that Collins gave me a lecture on revenge and told me that the man who had revenge in his heart was not fit to be a volunteer. So, pretty convincing evidence there. O'Daly's like, no, any time Collins told me to kill someone, it was a sanctioned military hit and it wasn't about revenge, because he wouldn't even let me shoot the bastard that pushed over my daughter. On the other hand,
No, from what I know about Michael Collins up until this point in the story, is that he's a man of steadfast beliefs who will not flip-flop.
yeah.
Up until this point.
Well, so supposedly other sources say, well, the Irish Times, they said there was very little to no rebel activity around Gorey. The town has been one of the quietest, if not the quietest, in all of Ireland. Up to the present day, nothing has occurred, according to the Irish Times article from back
What
then.
are they? The paper of record?
I don't know. When did they become the paper of record? Weren't they very much on record as saying all the 1916 men should be hung and shot?
I mean, that's the paper of record. they just record things. They don't stand by them.
I think it's the Irish Times. I'll take this out if it wasn't, but the Arnott from Arnott's shopping fame, he was the editor. And like when the guys are arrested after the rising, he published a big op-ed on the front page of the newspaper and was like, hanging's too good for them.
Hey, look, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully they bleed. But what was Robert Emmett hung and shot? Get that going again. But so according to Joe Sweeney, he happened to be in a bar in Wicklow Hotel that evening. Collins comes in, he says, "We got the bugger, Joe. Do you remember that first night outside the Rotunda? Lee Wilson? I'll never forget it," Sweeney said. "Well, we got him today in Gorey." So,
Well, look, who knows? It seems
I don't know.
pretty
I mean,
50-50 to me. Actually, no, it seems like he definitely went and did it.
what the hell would Joe Sweeney know? And the Irish Times, bloody...
That poor fella,
Blue
when he
shirts.
was like talking to his ma, when Lee Wilson was talking to his ma, he's like, "Where have you been stationed now?" Gorey. It's not what you think. It's actually the quietest part of the entire country, and the paper of record says nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I really hope the Irish Times at least ran with the headline of "Gory Death. Man shot once." Well, I suppose he was shot 5 times. Maybe it is pretty gory. But we haven't talked nearly enough about Ken Griffith.
Yeah, Ken Griffith.
We haven't talked nearly enough about Ken Griffith and his documentary in this part of the episode. But again, I'm going to start slicing in clips of him just saying, "The Irish Republican Army, the IRA."
The Irish Republican Army, the IRA.
I was watching it again the other night. It's so funny. We've tried to describe it a few times, but I think most of the description is just being like, "Oh man, it's so funny,"
Yeah.
and then not really much else. He's kind of like William Shatner,
Yes, yeah.
like William Shatner level of just overacting, and it's just him walking around the whole time describing Collins's life. It's very, very funny, but I don't know. This next little bit really made me think of him for some reason, but it's a weird tangent that the famous painting, Caravaggio's Taking of Christ,
Yeah.
from like late 1500s, one of Caravaggio's big paintings.
One of the big paintings in the world that we all know about.
yeah, it's one of the ones.
There's only a handful.
It was considered a lost piece of art for centuries, disappears off the face of the earth. And then it was found in the Jesuits College on Leeson Street in the 1990s here in Dublin. They brought in someone from the National Gallery to take a look at it. They wanted it touched up, and he was like, "Fucking hell, that's..." You see down here where it's got a big signature that says Caravaggio. This is the bloody one. And they realize it's the real painting. It's been missing for ages, and it's a big deal. They bring it into the gallery. It turns out where the Jesuits got it from was from a woman called Marie Lee Wilson, Percival's wife. After Percival was assassinated or shot, it turns out that she didn't have too many friends in the country. It was a bit of a dark time for her. And the Jesuits were one of the only groups to kind of tuck her in or whatever. They looked after her after she became a widow, after the shooting of her husband. And in 1934, she donated this painting to them. They had got it, I think either her or Percival had bought it in Scotland thinking it was a copy. And it made its way over to Ireland. He gets shot. She donates the painting to the Jesuits. It's in with the Jesuits for about 60 years until they find it and realize it's the real one. But Griffith would have loved the sort of over drama of it. Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio's depiction of Judas betraying Christ. A fitting tale, perhaps, for our private Percival.
Well done.
He would have fucking loved it.
You should have read the entire episode like this.
I can't do that voice for the rest of the thing. It'll take about 7 hours. But anyway, that's a little fun tangent about Caravaggio. July 1920, the auxiliaries are coming over. They are, I guess, less bloodthirsty than the Black and Tan. They're more organized. They're kind of there's the equivalent. They're bad men as well. They are responsible for a lot of atrocities during the War of Independence, but they're more kind of trained than the Black and Tans. The Black and Tans, they're just insane
Men have been
who have been given guns and set loose in the
not
country.
proven, but probably let out of jail from serving sentences they're currently serving to go and commit more crimes, but just in a different country.
They are more
How did the
counterinsurgency.
Black and Tans make the auxiliaries look halfway decent? That's
I don't know.
such an achievement. They're
Maybe that
also
was part
bastards.
of set the Black and Tans over, let them just run around shooting and fucking pillaging stuff. Then afterwards, send the auxiliaries over, and everyone's like, God, say what you will about them. At least they're not murdering civilians in the street too often. But August 1920, another nod to an episode we did, one of the first episodes we did that's on the Head Stuff Plus behind the paywall now. But
Temple
More Miracles.
Tipperary.
A classic bit.
Oh,
Yes. For about 2 months, the War of Independence stops in Tipperary when a fella, he's got a load of statues of the Virgin Mary, basically, and he swears up and down that there was blood coming out of her eyes. Becomes a pilgrimage for people. People are traveling down during the war. All fighting kind of stops for 2 months.
it's our Armistice month, but just for for a fake crying lady.
Yeah, it's like the World War I football truce, only this one's because of Virgin Mary statues. The whole thing ends supposedly when Collins, he doesn't really leave Dublin too much, but he gets one of the statues brought down to him. There's a depiction or a description of him, I suppose, breaking the statue and realizing the whole thing's a scam. And the whole war starts up again in earnest. But anyway, you can listen to that episode if you want to learn more about that. At some point after this, late 1920, early 1921, Collins gets access to Dublin Castle and the files on him, which is very funny.
Yes, and it's a weird part of the film because he does a proper Tobey Maguire Spider-Man thing when they come in when the British go in to check on them, and he's like, "Oh, someone's coming," and he just jumps up to the rafters.
That is true.
Like you
don't know,
literally jumps 10, 15 feet in the air and just holds himself up along the rafters. He could have just hid behind something.
You don't know that he didn't do that. He could have.
It's not a historical film.
I mean, it's the sort of thing that's...
In fairness to Neil Jordan, he said it's not a historical film. It's a vampire film.
It's stranger than fiction, I guess. It's in a movie. It makes for good cinema, but you're like, that couldn't have happened. But apparently it did. You don't have an exact time of it. But so at this point, he's built up his intelligence network. There's David Nalligan, who's referred to as the spy in the castle. James McNamara, Ned Broy, we already talked about.
In the film, that's all three of them are like, what? Yeah, that's just Stephen Ray.
Yes. All played by Stephen Ray,
Ray.
Amalgamation into Stephen Ray. But they do manage to sneak him into the castle. And Dublin Castle is like the center of the intelligence network. The G-men, the G division had been run out of there. This is like where it's the admin sort of headquarters of British intelligence on the island. And they managed to sneak Collins into the physical file room so that he can just have a rummage around and see the documents that the British have on him. And it's from this, I think we read the description in the first episode, but Collins manages to read the file on himself. It says, Michael Collins is a young man of fair complexion, clean-shaven, strong jaw and features. He may be about 28 years of age. He belongs to a family of brainy people who are disloyal and have advanced Sinn Féin sympathies. Which is it's pretty nice of him.
I mean, they got it all right.
Yeah, he's about 28 at that point. And
He's a strong Sinn Féin.
They probably...
I mean, they'd done their research.
Yeah.
That's why they had the G-men.
They did their own research. But there's other kind of posters you see floating around of him where they're like, darling blue eyes, cheeky grin, foppish hair. I think a lot of those are fake, but this one, they described him as quite a handsome fella.
And did it give his height?
No, it didn't. No, and nowhere. I don't. It doesn't mention that.
That's not just him going in.
We're not sure what he looks like.
How long did he have access to these files for? And just on the off chance, were they all written in his handwriting?
Yeah, did he start dotting them in?
Because they know nothing on it. It's an empty page. It's like, right, they've nothing on me. Tall.
They rubbed it in.
Handsome.
Written in the file was just a YouTube link, a handwritten YouTube link to the video of him handing out the Republican bonds. So he just rubbed that out. HTTPS, get rid of that. Write in handsome. Don't look at that video I made everyone watch. One of the big events of the War of Independence is 21st of November 1920, Bloody Sunday. The first of many in Irish history, but there's a new operation being sent over, a new gang, the Cairo gang, deployed to Dublin.
Yes.
So these men are either
super spy.
What were the theories that they're the Cairo gang because they've been...
They might have been stationed in Egypt, but they're British super spy army intelligence soldiers.
They're meant to be the be all and end all.
They're
They're
going to end all. This is going to be the end of it. This is like, we're sending in our very best. This is the
hit squad. This is meant to be the British government's response to Collins' squad, I suppose, the 12 Apostles. They're getting sent over to Dublin to specifically root out Collins and his gang. Collins instead manages to, well, again, it's the squad. Like, we'll talk about this more maybe in the third episode or at the end. Collins very rarely gets his hands dirty himself. Again, the only instance I remember of him holding a gun is when he gets shot. So when we say he's the one doing these things, it's under his direct orders. I can't remember if this ended up being in the episode that we put out or one of the other ones, but you made a lot of comparisons between Collins and a man called Jerry Adams.
I did not.
I'm fairly sure you did.
Fairly sure I made.
You and the BBC.
I'm fairly sure I
that.
made a lot of comparisons that were all they were very apt.
So he's more.
Just go watch Say Nothing. But then every time I might do that myself. I might make a supercut where I just replace every time they say Jerry with Michael.
Yeah, similar kind of a job maybe, but he directs the squad to go down. So basically, the Cairo gang come over to root out Collins. Instead, the squad manages to assassinate most of them. Some civilians get injured as well in the strike. But basically, it's a tactical maneuver where all these attacks are happening at the same time all across Dublin, the morning of the 21st. So it's a big psychological strike as well. Like this is the big new gang coming over, the Cairo gang. Oh shit, they've all been killed.
He's found out who they are, where they're living, and then found out a way to go kill them all in the space of a couple of hours.
Yeah.
It is, you'd imagine that's terrifying for them.
For sure. It sends a big message. It's a big strike. Like, we know where you're sleeping. We can get to you. And it's a kind of, we heard those quotes from Paddy O'Daly there where he's like, Mick never asked me to shoot a man who wasn't a legitimate target. This isn't regular military stuff. This isn't trench warfare. This isn't the heat of battle. This is basically assassinations.
Yeah.
But it's using, obviously the Irish have access to less soldiers than the British. It's using sort of this sort of guerrilla warfare, sneak tactics.
Yeah, and guns and experience and, everything.
Yeah. And it shows this is Mick's maneuver. This is Collins' maneuver. And the British respond with their kind of a maneuver. Just go in and start fucking shooting lads. So later on that evening or that afternoon, a load of troops storm into Crow Park and just open fire. So this is the Black and Tans, the auxiliaries. They come in with armoured cars into the middle of a match between Tipperary and Dublin. Big turnout, big event with a lot of people, a lot of civilians there watching the game. And they come in and open fire. It's a huge kind of turning point in the war. I mean, I keep saying that, but this is another escalation of the violence. This is opening fire on civilians who are out watching like the national sport. But during this period as well, Arthur Griffith is arrested in November 1920, and Dev doesn't get back from America. He's still in America until late December. So Collins is involved in the kind of lesser known negotiations with the British government for peace at that stage. There's the Archbishop Patrick Clune of Perth in Australia. He sort of orchestrates talks between Collins and the British government at this stage. I suppose the truce will come, July of next year, so it's not too far away from it. But this time they try one. It breaks down when the British government insists that the IRA surrender their weapons. And Collins is like, we need those for shooting you, so sorry about that.
Never surrender the weapons.
Never give up the weapons. That's what you need. You need them for stuff like the Kilmichael ambush. The IRA under Tom Barry kills 17 auxiliaries.
Within a week of Bloody Sunday.
Yes.
Just another direct. They're like, that'll soften their cough. It'll be done now, finished.
But there's a lot of action happening in Cork, because in mid-December then, there's the burning of Cork. It's another kind of retaliation because of the Kilmichael ambush. But basically, the Black and Tans, the auxiliaries come in and just burn Cork City at the time, which is another major kind of civilian atrocity. But this is all happening concurrently with political maneuvers that don't get talked about too much, I think. We'll talk about them a little bit more in the third episode, or mostly in the third episode. But in November 1920, the Government Act of Ireland comes through Parliament. It gets enforced in May of 1921. But this creates Northern Ireland, essentially. It breaks Ireland into two.
If I know my history, Kevin, Northern Ireland, that was created after Michael Collins signed. He gave the treaty, signed the treaty. So he went to England and he sold us down the river, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we had a divided country.
Yeah, and the Civil War was fought because men didn't want to see their brothers in the North left behind. Really, the Civil War was fought over the oath.
Yeah.
It's fought over words. We'll talk about that again in the third episode. But this is the groundwork for Northern Ireland. It starts in November of 1920. But anyway, you got ramping up of the war in Cork, Michael Collins's home turf. Heading into 21, you've got
Dev comes home with a load of Tommy guns with Harry Boland.
Yes.
Ned Broy gets arrested.
Yeah, you're right. Harry Boland and Dev come back. Tensions are ramping up, and things are starting to fall loose for Collins. He's not getting enough weapons into the country. He's meant to be in charge of, I suppose, sourcing guns and stuff for the continuation of fighting around the country. He's meant to be sourcing guns and getting them out to the IRA commanders. You've got a couple of incidents that happen in sort of quick enough succession. Ned Broy gets arrested. The British find documents that point out that there's spies within the G-Force. They root out Ned Broy, and this is...
That must have been a pretty easy one to do, though. Oh, they're like, there's spies. I wonder who they are.
But this is a blow to Collins's intelligence network. He's losing the spies. They're closing ranks inside the castle. His rank and file are getting annoyed with him again for like not sourcing weapons. In April, his house gets burnt down in Cork.
Yes.
Which is the opening to Ken Griffith's documentary.
Yeah, he says it would have happened when he was younger, so that would have stoked the flames of his Fenian hatred for the British, and it's like just years later.
But it's a perfect encapsulation of that whole documentary. He was walking from deep in shot up towards camera. He's talking about the house, and he talks about the officer who surrendered to the Japanese in Singapore. He shouldn't have burnt down that house, maybe. Just a lot of... I'm just going to play that clip here, actually, because it's very funny.
As a matter of passing fact, the English soldiers ordered the Collins family, 2 women and 8 children, out of the cottage before burning it to the ground. The soldiers threw everything onto the flames, household effects, baby's cradle, everything. In charge of this typically English military operation in Ireland was a Major A.E. Percival, later to become Lieutenant General Percival, CBDSO, Order of the British Empire, MC, the officer who surrendered a British army to the Japanese at Singapore. Anyway, he shouldn't have burned that little farmhouse down.
But you've got the burning of the Custom House in May 1921. Things are getting and Collins, he's a military man. His whole grief with 1916, if there was any, was that it wasn't a very tactical military success. At this point, he's kind of getting disillusioned with the prospects of actually winning a conflict with the British. His intelligence is drying up. He can't get guns for the fellas. Civilian attacks are up. There's the Black and Tans, the auxiliaries, is all running around. There's a lot of pressure to get to a truce. And eventually, July 1921, a truce is organised between the Provisional Irish Government, the Dáil, and the British government. They all decide to get around the table and hash it out. So there's a truce in July of 1921. Collins is annoyed that Dev doesn't involve him at this point. So we've got kind of like Collins does these negotiations in November 1920. Here, about half a year later on, July 1921, it's the real truce. The War of Independence is put on hold. The two sides get together, start talking. Collins is not initially chosen to go to these talks. It's Dev. And Collins is supposedly annoyed that he's left out of this. But he wouldn't be annoyed for long. Because in September... So I've read that he was annoyed both ways. Initially in July, he's annoyed because he's left out of these negotiations.
And then he's annoyed that he...
Yeah, because Dev comes back and is like, how about you go over there by yourself, Mick? You do the talking. And at that point, he seems to be annoyed in the other direction because he feels like maybe he's been sent over as a sacrifice. But we're going to wrap up the episode here. This is the truce. Episode 3, we'll talk about the negotiations and the kind of... So basically, he's dead within a year of... He's sent over on the 14th of September, 1921. He'll be dead by August 22. So we'll do his last almost year, I guess, in episode 3. But leaving off episode 2, I don't know, I stuck up a thing on Instagram there during the week about Collins's hurling. There's some great pictures of him from...
the Leinster finals of 1921.
The Leinster finals of 1920 and 1. But there's a beautiful write-up in the Irish independent. So basically, there's the truce in July, and he's known during the war for this like secretive nature. He's an underground man. He's running and ducking and diving. He's the head of the squad. No one knows who he is, where he is. And after this, he makes a big public appearance for the 1921 Leinster final, the Leinster hurling final between Kilkenny and Dublin. And he's in the middle of Croke Park in front of 15,000 people. The Irish Independent writes it up.
Wait,
as,
only 15,000?
Listen, GA is struggling, man.
I suppose it must have built on the stadium, but like a lot after, yeah.
Yeah, well, sure, they built on all those new stadiums named after all the men who got shot during Bloody Sunday. But so in the article it talks about Harry Bolan. Like everyone knows Harry's a hurler, but it goes on to say when Michael Collins had a few preliminary shots before he started the match yesterday, we realised that he too had handled a hurley before. That left-handed flying double of his drew a cheer as hearty as the ovation he received when he set the teams going. For 5 minutes, the 15,000 spectators saw him no longer a hunted fugitive or a minister of finance, but a schoolboy at play. Which is...
It's beautiful.
Can you imagine the scenes of, like, it's less than a year.
Yeah,
November 1920.
I could sit around and answer questions about if I did or didn't illegally shoot Captain Percival Lee Wilson. Or I could hit some dingers for you. How about that, kids?
Exactly. But like, just the crack of, it's less than a year since Bloody Sunday, the massacre, civilian shot in the exact same Croke Park. He's just done toe-to-toe, brought the British Empire to a truce. And here he is fucking knocking points over the bar in Croke Park. People are going ballistic. Like, people don't really, maybe even, they wouldn't have seen him. The lads from Kilkenny would have only heard rumours of him. And there he is out. And when you see the pictures, like, full suit and tie, wearing a fucking hat, and just knocking points over the bar. Unbelievable. If he had have just refused to go, if he had have just walked away then, if he had have just become a GAA commentator, people would have had, there'd be statues to him up and down this country. But
well, Kev, you either
episode 3,
die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. Or you die a hero and then you don't live long enough to see yourself become a villain in the aftermath.
Yes. Episode 3, the downfall of Mick. Or, well, at least the parts that people find, all the sort of contentious parts for Mick will be doing in episode 3. This is the heel turn. He gets sent to do the negotiations within, I don't think I fully wrapped my head around how short a period this is. Like, from when he gets back from 1916, he's dead by 1922. All of these main things associated with Mick happen within those couple of years. He goes from a relative nobody in the IRB ranks to, like, leading at various points, being very high up in the IRB, the sort of Irish Volunteers, the IRA, and being very high up in Sinn Féin, the executive political wing, to being one of the lead negotiators, to being one of the most hated men in the country, to being dead very quickly. And we'll talk about the switch in episode 3, but episode 3 next week. Thanks for listening.
So much more.
And right, good luck.
After.